Hi there, I'm Rodney Crowell. Let's be honest. What I'm doing is making an advertisement for my new album, Texas, which will be released August 15th, 2019. First song on side one is called Flatland Hillbillies, which I wrote with my good friend Mary Carr, who, like myself, is a native of Southeast Texas. And the song is basically a portrait of the working class people that we grew up around, that our fathers worked with, and, you know, Scots-Irish, wage slaves, basically. The recording of Flatland Hillbillies, I have some help from the likes of Randy Rogers, a famous Texas artist, and the legendary Leanne Womack, both who contributed mightily to the recording. Song number two began maybe 6 months before Guy Clark passed away. And he was telling me the story about having visited a windmill derrick museum out in Amarillo or Lubbock, somewhere out there in northwest Texas. And he was telling me about having seen a barbed wire nest made by crows. And he had written down a couple of verses. And he was growing weak and really couldn't work anymore, but he said, man, I really need help with this. Help me finish it. So that's how Caw Caw Blues came to be, and it's really an idea that Guy had that he wanted to see finished. And when I recorded it, I sought the help from Vince Gill, an Oklahoma boy who's comfortable in Texas just as much. And turned out really well. The third cut on the album is called 56 Fury, which is a song inspired by a photograph of my father-in-law. And in the picture, he's sitting behind the wheel of a beautiful white 1956 Plymouth Fury, spit curl falling down his forehead, looking every bit like a rock and roll star, proud to be behind the wheel of that automobile. And what I realized that the song needed to be was pure Texas Roadhouse rock and roll, and I thought, who better than Billy F. Gibbons of ZZ Top fame to come in and help me with the recording? And help he did. He blisters a guitar on it, and that's cut number 3, 56 Fury. Thank you, Billy. Song number 4 on the album is called Very Deep in the Heart of Uncertain Texas, which happens to be a wide spot in the middle of the road with a sign, Uncertain Texas, in Cass County, very close to Caddo Lake, where way back in 1976 I went fishing with a roadie friend of mine and a bass player named Emery Gordy. Recording it, I drafted Ronnie Dunn. Wisely, I drafted Ronnie Dunn, who helps out with the second verse, Leanne Womack, who grew up very close to Uncertain Texas, and a whole host of others who just helped me bring that song to life. Song number 5 is called You're Only Happy When You're Miserable, and it happened to be the very first song I recorded for the album. And it happened to be that I collaborated with a drummer from a famous band called the Beatles, Ringo Starr, who, through a mutual friend, we got to the notion that we could record something together, and we did. A happy day making that recording. A few years ago, I had the beginning of a song. I had a guitar riff, and I went over to Guy Clark's house and said, Guy, this is something we got to collaborate on. And the idea I had for the song was called I'll Show Me, kind of a bluesy jazz moving song. And Guy and I spent an afternoon, writing some words down and putting it together, and I made a demo of it that laid around, and Guy even recorded it, I think on his last album. But I always had in the back of my mind exactly how I wanted to do it, and it became cut number 6 on the album, I'll Show Me. Cut number 7 on the album Texas is a collaboration between myself and Lyle Lovett. I've been an admirer and a friend of Lyle's for a good many years, and saw an opportunity to put together this song, which is basically a conversation between two old friends. One in trouble with not being able to make it work out with women, which would be my narrative part, and Lyle being the voice of reason and wisdom. And that's a recording, what you're going to do now. Must have been around the year 2004, 2005. Alan Shamblin, great songwriter from Huffman, Texas, which is very near where I grew up and where I graduated from high school. He came around with an idea about a song about life on the Texas-Mexico border. And this was way back before, it was so much in the glare of cable news. Well, we tinkered with the song for a good number of years, 10 years at least. We had conversations about it. And as the recording of the album came closer and drew near, I finally wrapped my head around exactly how I thought the song should go. And it's called The Border.
Cool.
Get me out of it. This
sounds good.
Cut number 9 on the album Texas is called Treetop Slim and Billy Lowgrass. And that song is based on a photograph that I found in a house I rented in Nacogdoches, Texas when I was flunking out of college. A sepia tone, looked like hand-painted photograph of two old kid cowboys, one of them about 6'6" and the other about 5'4". They might have been just ranch hands or something, East Texas ranch hands, but to me they looked like desperados, outlaws. So I made up the story of Treetop Slim and Billy Lowgrass, a couple of child outlaws on the run from the law in East Texas. Treetop Slim and Billy Lowgrass. Well, the album Texas actually really started as a conversation between Steve Earle and myself, going way back into the 80s when Steve's first solo record came out, and he started performing live on his tour this song that I'd written called Brown and Root, about the construction company that most every man I knew growing up in Texas worked for. Construction workers, hard hat construction workers. Steve and I talked for years about we should get together and record this song. And so when it finally came to pass that we were going to get in the studio together and record Brown and Root, I said, okay, this is the beginning of this album that I'm going to make. And from there, it started to take shape. Brown and Root. Brown and Root, it's called. The album closes with a song called Texas Drought, number 1. And then I got the idea to write the song based on an article I read about a real serious drought that hit the state of Texas in the mid to late 1950s, which was also the time that I was first hearing music by Jimmy Reed and first visiting with my parents' drive-in restaurants where you get your hamburgers and your chocolate malt and your cold beer delivered by a car hop. Somehow all of that inspired the song, and I put all of those feelings together in Texas Drought number 1, which would tell you that there is a Texas Drought number 2, which will eventually make it out there into the world. So that's the list of songs on the album Texas. Hope you enjoy.